Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name's Kaylee and these are my books. So today's video is where I'm going to be talking about my recent reads. This includes the last half of December and then the beginning half of January. I did post a mid-month check-in in December, so that video will be linked below in case you're curious what I read at the beginning of the month. But this video was supposed to be my December wrap-up, but suddenly it is January 20th and it's still not posted. And I also needed to do a January mid-month check-in. So we're just smashing them into one video. As always, the order in which I'm going to talk about books is starting with my lowest rated reads and then working my way up to 5 stars. I do have 21 books to talk about. However, most of these books are actually like 4 or 5 stars. I've been having some real good times with reading recently. But I do have a 1 star, so let's start with that 1 star. My only 1 star, I don't even have any 2 stars, so the only book I actively disliked within this past about a month of reading was All I Want for Christmas. And this is incredibly unfortunate that I did in fact dislike it because I was stuck with it on a plane. I had a 3.5 hour flight from Texas to California to go back home for Christmas. And I was stuck with this book. It's the only book I brought. Never again will I not bring multiple options because holy crap, I was stuck reading this terrible book. To be clear, there are some people that liked it, okay? I'm not saying it's objectively terrible. It was terrible to me though. It is a book that normally I would have DNF'd, but because I was stuck with it, I stuck through and finished the book. This is a holiday romance book that follows 2 contestants on a singing competition, and they get grouped together because the audience sees that they have chemistry, but really they actively dislike each other. They're having to balance their TV personas with their behind the stage drama with each other, and the premise sounds so fun. I love books that center around reality television. I've never really read a book that talks about reality singing competitions. Thought it would be super fun, but it just ended up not being my thing. The reality singing competition was about country singing, which I didn't know before starting the book that it's centered around country singing, and therefore it has a lot of tropes that you would expect for country singing competitions to have. And I know that's a lot of people's thing, it's just not my thing, so it ended up not hitting in certain moments, and I think certain moments that were supposed to be really cool and awesome to read about were just a bit cringy for me. And then I just found the characters so insufferable. Both of them were terrible people in my opinion. I couldn't get behind them. And then this book, the structure of the book was constant time jumps. We were constantly moving forward weeks at a time, and then there was a whole year time jump. I don't like time jumps in books because it makes me feel like I don't know the characters very well. And this book, literally every chapter was at minimum a 2-week time jump, it felt like. I didn't like this book. I would not recommend it for a holiday romance. And the average rating on Goodreads is pretty low too, which I did not know before I picked this book up. I bought it purely based off of the synopsis, but it seems like a lot of people are having some similar feelings about it as I am. Moving into my 3-star reads, the first of which is actually an incredibly disappointing 3-star read, and it is Queens of Myths and Monsters. I got the arc for this from NetGalley, so I read it back in December before it was out, and I loved King of Battle and Blood. This is book 2 in that series. It's a fantasy romance series, and I gave King of Battle and Blood 5 stars. I was so hyped for the sequel because I loved the first book, and so this book just getting 3 stars only is very disappointing. I just felt like the characters completely backtracked on any character development that happened in the first book. And it was so frustrating to read because, again, any progress that we got within their interpersonal relationships just was completely thrown out the window, in my opinion, in this second book. So it was frustrating to read. I kept wanting to go back and have the characters reread book 1 because I'm don't you remember this? Come on. There was some action in some moments that made this book more enjoyable, which is why I ended up getting 3 stars and not lower. So I didn't hate this book. I will be continuing on in the series, but my main point of issue was just the characters were so annoying in this second book. Because Queen of Myths and Monsters is book 2 in a series, I can't tell you the synopsis for that one, but I can tell you the synopsis for book 1 in the series, King of Battle and Blood. This is basically a fantasy romance that follows a human, and a human's kingdom trying to fight against the monsters, and the monsters are vampires, and the vampires are invading a bunch of kingdoms, and the human kingdom's princess basically agrees to marry the vampire king in order to save her people. And so it's just about the romance between the human princess and the vampire king. And it's so much fun. I love this first one. Sad I didn't love the second one. My next 3-star read is actually yet again another pretty disappointing 3-star read, and that is Cytonic. This was disappointing simply because this is book 3 in Brandon Sanderson's Skyward series, and I've given everything else in this series 5 stars, so for book 3 to get 3 stars is so sad. I still consider this series one of my favorite series. I mean, book 4 hopefully will pick it back up and cementing its place as one of my favorite sci-fi series, but this book I just felt like nothing happened, and we lose so many characters in this book, like not by death, I just mean like this book doesn't have so many characters that I wanted it to have in it. It's really just focused on Spensa, and I do like Spensa's character. She is my favorite character. I don't like her enough to have the book be solely focused on her, and the other characters that were brought up in this story I didn't care about at all. I didn't form any new attachments to people. Like book 2 had a lot of new characters in it, and I formed new attachments to those characters. But this one I didn't like, and there was a bit of an amnesia trope in here, and I hate amnesia tropes when it doesn't have a character start with amnesia. These are characters that we've already known and see as established, and then the amnesia starts to hit. I'm just like, no, all that character development that we saw happen is just being thrown out the window. I didn't really like the setting of this book either, like where it was placed I didn't care about. And so there were a lot of issues with this book. The reason why I still got 3 stars is I did still find it enjoyable. It was nice to sink back into this world, back into this series, hang out with Spensa a bit more, but it is a disappointing 3-star. I can't give you a synopsis for this book because it's book 3 in the series, but synopsis for book 1, it's a YA sci-fi series that is about Spensa as our main character who is going through pilot training school. However, everyone doesn't trust her to be a pilot because her father was a pilot and then turned on his friends up in the air for some reason. So he was branded a coward, which means Spensa was branded a coward. So basically she's a society outcast, but she's wanting to raise up the ranks to be a pilot, which is the highest ranking person you can be in this society because they live on a planet that is constantly requiring pilots to fight aliens that are trying to attack them. My next 3-star is a book called Dead Drop by Tate James. This is book 2 in her Guild series. I kind of binge read a bunch of Tate James books in this past couple of weeks, so you're gonna see a bunch of them pop up. I'm honestly not even sure the best way to talk about these. Maybe instead of going in order of rating, I'll just go in order of the series and tell you what I thought throughout. So Dead Drop is the last in the series, so we'll get to that one in a second, but spoiler alert, it was 3 stars. But basically, I had already read the Madison Kate series by Tate James and loved it, and she has a bunch of series that are all set in the same world. And so the next series after Madison Kate was the Hades series, so that's the one that I picked up next. And these, I read all of these as audiobooks while I was playing Fallout 4 because they're just like silly, smutty, dark romances that you don't have to pay super close attention to, but they are entertaining enough to work as perfect audiobooks for while I'm doing more of the grinding aspects of a video game. And so the first book in the Hades series called 7th Circle, I gave 4 stars. I really liked it, but I wasn't like super attached to the characters yet. And then books 2, 3, and 4 in the Hades series, titled Anarchy, Club 22, and Timber, I ended up giving all 3 of those 5 stars. I adored the Hades series by the end of it. Highly recommend the Hades series. The Hades series, again, like I said, it's a dark romance series, but it is about Hades, who is a woman that is in charge of a bunch of different gangs, and basically she's like the head honcho, and all the other gang leaders have to answer to her in this town that's kind of similar to like a Gotham type of town. You know, it's a town with lots of organized crime going on in it, and this Hades figure is the head woman. And so basically it's just about her trying to exist as a woman in charge, a woman in power with a bunch of men that don't want her to be in power. And then also her fighting against her boyfriend because her boyfriend is like this evil psychopath that's trying to get back at her for escaping the relationship. And so this book series is kind of like part revenge thriller, part reverse harem romance. So just to recap, book 1 in the series I gave 4 stars, and then books 3, 4, and 5 in the series I gave 5 stars. And then I read Vault, which is a novella based from the Madison Kate series, but it takes place chronologically after the Hades series. And I gave Vault 3.5 stars. I enjoyed it, but it's just a novella. You know, it's so short, it's hard to give it more than 3.5 stars because it's not enough time to really like sink in and connect to the story. But this is more of a diamond heist novella that follows Madison Kate. So Madison Kate had her own reverse harem romance, so it's her and her 3 guys plus diamond heist shenanigans. It was fun, enjoyable read, 3.5 stars. And then, chronologically, we move into the Guild series. And I have not finished the series. I think there's 3 books out. I don't think it's completed, or it could be completed. I'm not sure if there's going to be 3 books or 4 books, but it doesn't matter because I only read the first 2 books. And I gave book 1, Honey Trap, 5 stars. Loved it. And this was actually my favorite out of all of these books set in the same world. Honey Trap was my #1 choice. And the Guild series follows a woman that's kind of like Black Widow. She is a private assassin that works for this company called the Guild, and they're like an international organization. So we've moved out of just the town that is the setting for Madison Kate series and the Hades series and into just like the whole world. And it really is like Black Widow before she got recruited by Marvel, back when she was just like a Russian spy working for that private organization. Like, it's so fun to read about. It's about her working within the Guild, but thinking that the Guild is trying to kill her, but the Guild is super secretive and really powerful, so she's trying to navigate the internal Guild politics while also being assigned this impossible task of killing Ares, who is a weapons dealer. I adored book 1, gave it 5 stars. It's hard for me to tell you why I loved it without spoiling it because it's specific tropes within the plot that made me love it so much. I guess to put it in a very mild way, forced proximity, but this is a very much dark romance, so it leans more into the kidnapping side. It leans even farther than kidnapping, honestly. Like there's straight up torture in this book. This book is dark, but I really liked it. It really felt like part thriller horror, part smutty romance. I had a great time with it. And then I read book 2, which brings us back to me talking about my 3-star reads, called Dead Drop, and I just felt like we got some backwards character development that I saw happen in book 1. Didn't love it as much as book 1. I still am going to continue the Guild series because I'm hoping we get back to book 1 pacing and characters. As you can tell, I just binged all these books. They were so addicting, highly readable, very entertaining, and worked to help me binge play Fallout 4. Now moving into my 3.5-star reads. The first of which is An Echo of Things to Come. This was the book choice for Backlist Book Club. There's a whole live show where I discussed my thoughts with Cassidy, Mel, and Bex. It'll be linked in the description box below. Similarly, my next 3.5-star read is Gardens of the Moon, first book in the Malazan series. I'm doing a Malazan read-along with a bunch of other cool people. We did a whole live show discussing this book and talking about our thoughts about this book and why I gave it 3.5 stars. That will also be linked in the description box below. Now moving into my 4-star reads, the first of which is Blood Rights. This was another plane read when I was going back from California to my home in Texas. And this is, I believe, book 6 in the Dresden Files? Yeah, book 6. I'm pretty sure, book 6. It's hard to keep track when this series has so many books in there. But this, I gave 4 stars. It is my least favorite in the series so far, but obviously I still gave it 4 stars, so I still really enjoyed it. I just wasn't as into the actual plot that was happening in this book and the mystery that was happening in this book, and I feel like the world didn't expand as much as I wanted it to happen in this book, because in our past books, I felt like the stakes were higher and our world was getting expanded more and more and more. Where this, it really felt like a book that kind of slowed down, hit the brakes on the plot a little bit. Don't get me wrong, there's still a plot in this, but explored the characters more and gave us some more smaller character moments. Like there is some development with potential recognition of found family trope, and we got some more backstory on some recurring characters in the series, and I did appreciate that, but I love myself a good plot, so I was missing that a little bit in this book. And again, this is book 6, so I can't give you a synopsis for this book, but The Dresden Files is a urban fantasy series that follows a wizard detective solving magical cases in the city of Chicago. And so these books are part mystery, part fantasy, and they are pretty episodic, like each book is its own mystery, but there are plot threads that are expanded more and more in each book. So there is an overarching plot and then an episodic plot for each book. My next 4-star was War. This is book 2 in the Four Horsemen series. I loved Pestilence, gave Pestilence 5 stars, so then I was continuing on with War. Ended up giving War 4 stars because it took me so long to read. I feel like there was a big section in the middle that felt really repetitive, just the same thing happening over and over and over. And you would think that would mean I would give it a lower score. But then the ending was so good and so bonkers. And I cried at the ending. And so I had to give it 4 stars because, oh my god, those last 100 pages were perfect. So this book is pretty long. I think it was like over 500 pages. And I think it would have been a 5-star read if it was about 400 pages. There was just a solid like 100 pages in there that I felt like could have been cut out. But War is a dark romance that follows a horseman of the apocalypse, War himself, and he is very much like a Khal Drogo type of figure, and he is just assembling an army and riding through on his horses and wreaking havoc upon all of these villages. And he basically sees our main female character and sees a marking on her body that he believes brands her as his wife. So he takes her to be his wife. But she is like, hell no, you are terrible. I'm not going to be your wife. So it's very much enemies to lovers type of situation. My next 4-star read was Battle Royale. This is a thriller slash horror book. I don't know. I would maybe classify it as horror because there is quite a bit of gore in this book. Like, this book is gory. Lots of gore, so be warned, this book is gory. But basically this is a story that is set in a version of Japan that picks one graduating class from one of the high schools in Japan to send in this arena, and they have to fight to the death. It's very similar to Hunger Games, but this book is much darker because this is an adult book. There's gore, basically. Like, there are some horrific scenes that we read, and these kids are really being put through it, and everyone kind of sucks, but like, you understand why everyone sucks. It was a wild ride. The reason why I ended up giving it 4 stars and not 5 stars, even though I did love so much of it, is because I felt like at points there was a little bit too much action for me, and it was making me feel a bit distant from the whole story because like everyone was just dying, which I understand why. But if there's too much action and not enough character moments, I start to stop caring when the characters are dying if I haven't been told enough about who these people are. That's just a small criticism. It wasn't happening all the time. There were just a couple moments that I felt like should have evoked a emotional response from me that didn't hit because I needed a couple more smaller character moments. But overall, I loved this book and I do highly recommend it. Next up is a bit of a surprise 4-star because I really expected to dislike this book, and that is The Golden Couple. This is a domestic thriller that follows a couple going to counseling for their marriage because the woman has been cheating on her husband, and the therapist though is a very avant-garde therapist. Like, she lost her license because she does things that no therapists are supposed to do. And so basically this couple has signed off that the therapist can do whatever it takes to save their marriage. I thought this book was so entertaining. I read it in one sitting because I just could not put it down. Is it memorable? No, it's pretty forgettable. But it's just such an entertaining, fun time that it fully deserved the 4 stars. And then next up for 4 stars are actually 9 books, and that is Blood on the Tracks volumes 2 through 11. I just binge read all of these. These are so short. I looked on Libby to see how long it was taking me to read each volume, and it was taking me on average like 13 minutes to read each volume, so that kind of tells you how short these volumes are. So it's not like totally insane to tell you that I read 9 or 10 volumes of manga in a row. But these are so fun. These are things though that are so short that I can't give each individual volume over 4 stars because it's such a small snippet of the story. These are not volumes that have their own like full self-contained story within each volume. Like, it really feels like just one piece of the story, and then when you put all the volumes together, it's an actual story. So while I would rate this series a 5-star series, each individual volume has to be 4 stars for me, purely because there's just not enough content to elicit a 5-star rating. But I love this. It really gives me the vibes of the Bates Motel TV show, where there's a really creepy mother and son relationship, and it's just about him trying to go to school and exist in the world having a mother like he does. All right, moving into my 5 stars now. The first of which is In a Holidays. I read this during Christmas time, loved it so much. This is a book that I was a little bit apprehensive to read because I've seen so many mixed reviews about it, but it totally worked for me. This is a holiday romance that has a time loop, which basically there is a woman that is in love with one of her family friends, and they do Christmases together. Both their families do Christmases together each year at this cabin. And then as she is leaving the cabin after Christmas and hasn't made a move on the guy, each time she leaves, she dies and then restarts the whole holiday all over again. The time loop was so entertaining. I was legitimately laughing out loud at a lot of the moments in this book. It was so funny and then so sweet too, all the little character moments throughout. I love this book. This is one of my favorite traditionally published romances of all time, and I think it's because the sci-fi time loop elements really worked for me. Next up, I read Creep and Freak from Jennifer Hillier and gave both 5 stars. I'm talking about these together because it's book 1 and book 2 in a duology from Jennifer Hillier. And Jennifer Hillier writes dark thrillers, and that's what these books are. They're very dark thrillers. So they are not horror books though. They are thriller books, but they just have darker content than a traditional thriller typically has. And this is a story about a man who is a stalker, psychopath, this woman tries to break up with, and he is like, hell no, you're not breaking up with me. He starts blackmailing her, and she is just trying to live her life, and then things quickly spiral out of control. This series, there were a lot of elements in it that reminded me of You, both the book series and the television show, where we very much had stalking, obsessive behavior involved. But the thing about Jennifer Hillier is that I just think she does characters so well for thriller books. And these books are no exception. The character work in here is really cool to read about, and this plot is just wild. Like things go crazy in it. You think it starts involving just these 2 people, and like I said, they spiral, and let me just tell you, we are left with quite the body count by the end. I did like book 1 more. I liked Creep more, but I gave both of them 5 stars, so I loved both of them. But if I had to choose, book 1 was a bit better. And then my last book to talk about, my last 5-star, was Comfort Me with Apples. This is a horror novella that I am not really going to tell you anything about. Okay, that's not fair of me. It's just I went into this book knowing nothing, and I think really that's the best way to do it because this is a weird book. You're going to start this and be like, what am I reading? It will be very confusing in the way that it makes no sense. The plot itself is not confusing. Like, you'll be able to grasp what is going on, but what is going on is just so weird. You're like, where's this going? And that's the confusing element of just not knowing where this story is going. But basically, we just are in this woman's point of view, and she lives in this perfect area where there's a very, very strict HOA, and she seems to be living domestic bliss where she is perfectly happy existing in a state purely to please her husband. And that's the setup. Things go weird though. Things go very, very weird. I loved it. I loved this book so much. It took me by surprise, like I said, because I knew nothing about it. So I think if you haven't read this book, try it out knowing nothing. It's a novella, so I'm not asking you to suspend your disbelief for quite a long time where you're going to be reading it and not knowing what you're reading for like days and days and days, because it is just a novella. So, you know, you can read it for an hour or 2 and just let it overtake you. Let it take you on that journey. And I thought by the end it was so worth it, so satisfying when the reveal happens and we see what's really going on. And I was amazed at what I was reading. Okay, but that is everything that I have been reading recently. Let me know down in the comments what some recent 5-star books that you've read are. And if you enjoyed this video, please like the video and subscribe for more content, and I'll see you next time. Bye!